Hi, I'm Rachel Morrison. I'm a cinematographer, and I'm here with the illustrious Ari Wegner, cinematographer on Power of the Dog. Hi, Ari.
Hi, Rachel. So lovely to finally meet you.
You as well. It's been a long time coming, and of course, now it's over Zoom from about 1,000 or many thousand miles away, but better than nothing.
Yeah, very 2021/22.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful work, first of all. The film is just stunning. And I also, for myself, was to see, I love Zola as well. So to
Oh,
see, I mean, you almost can't get a bigger distinction between those two films. And I thought that was just incredibly exciting. So kudos.
thanks.
And yeah, I guess just let's jump into it. Maybe tell me a little bit about yourself as a cinematographer and the moment you realized you wanted to be a cinematographer.
Yeah, I kind of came to film pretty late. I wasn't like the kid that was playing with Super 8 when I was 8 years old. I guess I never thought of cinema really as an art form. I had plenty of art kind of in our childhood. My dad was always a visual artist and a lot of kind of analog painting and drawing, and but we didn't have much kind of cinema in our lives. We didn't even have a VCR. Watching a lot of crappy Australian children's television. Anyway, then when I got to be in high school and started to kind of discover filmmaking, and then I was already into photography and into writing. So I discovered there was a thing called cinematographer, which is kind of those two things together, like using images to tell a story, like visual storytelling. I just got super excited that those, two passions of mine could exist in one, and this new kind of cinema that I was starting to discover. So yeah, I went to film school and then kind of came up through camera department, was always shooting along the way as I was a really mediocre second AC because I was just there to spy on DPs and what they were up to. And then I
did you ever first, I always say the same thing, which is like, I feel like first ACing, the really great first, it's almost like the opposite brain set. I would never, I would be probably the worst first AC ever. I'm just like, whatever side of your brain is, calculated and likes to keep things organized and clean. I have none of that.
Yeah, I guess I couldn't ever, I know it's such an amazing role, and for people whose brains are kind of wired that way, it's like, it's such a joy and a gift to watch people doing that. But yeah, I was always kind of looking to shoot and was always kind of shooting small things on the side with my film school kind of buddies. Then eventually decided to just make the jump and kind of one small thing after another. And
yeah, it seems I mean, so much of it comes down to the choices, right? Like people often ask what's the secret? And there really is no secret, but I think so much of it is finding projects that you feel passionate about and sort of choosing wisely and not getting sidetracked by the carrot that may be a good paycheck or your first studio film, but if it doesn't speak to you, it feels like maybe we had a similar path in that way. Like every film you've done is something you can stand by and feel proud. I certainly have some I would like to bury, but for the most part, I'm you invest in something you care about, and it seems like you've had a similar journey, like beautiful films that, very unique stories that are meaningful in some ways. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'm really bad at kind of pretending I'm passionate about something when I'm not. I can't really turn on that.
Yeah.
That I can't just turn that on. So, and I know such like doing a feature film, especially, it's such a responsibility and such a kind of commitment. I get so consumed by whatever the project is. So I have to kind of choose very carefully if this is, it's not just a project, but it's going to be your life essentially for the next, 3-6 months. Or whereas The Power of the Dog was like over 2 years of being kind of the main focus of your life. So yeah, definitely only jump on something when I know that the passion's not going to wane when things get tough, because they always do, no matter what.
Yeah,
no matter
absolutely.
what the project. There's always a moment when you.
Yeah, so you better love it to put up. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the 2 year, or really a year of prep, which I've obviously read about and seen you speak about, but maybe for people who don't know what a luxury that is, if you can compare and contrast that to a normal film experience, and speak to how you guys sort of collaborated together in that time.
Yeah, it was one of the first things Jane said when she first called me about the film was kind of, what are you up to? And not just like, what are you up to?
Wait, let's hold that thought for 1 second. Can we just talk about Jane Campion calling you and saying, recreate that moment for us?
Well, a few years prior to that, maybe 3 years or so prior to her calling, we'd done a little commercial together. Jane doesn't usually do commercials, but kind of one came to her, and we had a really great mutual friend who was also a director that I shoot for, who recommended who thought we might work well together. And we had a really fun time. It's only a couple of, a short kind of few days and a few days prep, but I think we got to the end, we both knew we shared the same aesthetic and really enjoyed just the shooting process together, and also really both kind of nerdy preppers when it came to how well prepared we wanted to be, and just how we, I guess, worked together during the shoot day to be kind of on track with the plan, but also flexible and support each other. Then we kind of both went our separate ways, I guess, and Jane did another season of Top of the Lake, and I did some films, and we kind of stayed in touch over that time and crossed paths a few times, because Australia and New Zealand's kind of such a small little group, so there's so much crossover with just social events and stuff. And then it was just before Christmas, I think. I was doing my grocery shopping, and my phone rang and said Jane Campion, and I really genuinely thought it must be a pocket call, because why is Jane Campion calling me on Christmas Eve? And she said that she was looking to do a film. She was still in the process of writing. She didn't quite have a script that was ready to read, but one of her first things was that she was looking for a DP that would be ready to kind of start right away, almost. And when she said, what are you up to, it was not just what are you up to in the next few months, but what are you up to for the next year? And I'm sure you may or may not feel the same, but when and not only an amazing director calls to see if you're interested, but they really are passionate about pre-production, it's just kind of like two dreams in one. Because I'm always fighting for more pre-production. I always feel like I could do with more. I don't know about you. For me, it's usually kind of maybe 8 weeks if it's generous, 4 weeks if it's kind of low budget. But
just for a frame of reference, I think I had 3 weeks on Fruitvale compared to a year. So it can really run the gamut. I mean, that was not nearly enough, but it never is, to your point.
And I mean, it's not like I wasn't on the payroll for a year. It was more like there was some location scouts early on right away, and then other location scouts throughout the year, and then obviously the kind of intensive it was maybe 12 weeks of kind of full-time pre-production in the office with everyone. But throughout that year, I don't know, I just couldn't, it was kind of a self-imposed pre-production really, because I just couldn't think about anything else. I tried even to do a couple of commercials or anything, but my mind just kept kind of going back to Montana in 1926. And when you find yourself knowing that in a year's time or in 9 months' time or in 6 months' time, you're going to be doing this film and you need to do it justice, years feels like a reasonable amount of time. So many decisions to make, and want to kind of give each decision, I guess, like drafts of thoughts, not just have to shoot the first thought that could work in the way you do when you've only got 3 or 4 weeks before you're actually shooting.
Right.
I
read somewhere that you had initially planned to shoot 185, and that as you started boarding, you realized, that it just kept wanting to kind of expand into a widescreen film. I thought it was interesting more that you ever wanted to shoot it seems so natural, and obviously seeing the movie, it works so well to be widescreen. I'm curious what the initial thought was that both of you initially were thinking 185.
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, Jane's such a kind of dreamer and very kind of I don't know, romantic. And then she's got this very practical side, which is we knew that the film was always going to have a home on a streaming service, and that, you know, over the life of the film, probably the most number of people would see it at home on a, you know, 16:9 kind of TV. And did we want to, I guess, like use up all that space? Really, that was kind of quite a practical decision to start with. And yeah, it didn't seem like it would be too, it seemed like a kind of good enough place to start. But then once we started boarding and we had these locations where these, I guess these like long shapes kind of really started to present themselves, like the mountain range and even like the rope and, you know, a line of cattle on the horizon, and these kind of, we were doing boards and just finding that we were kind of drawing off the edges. We had these 185 boards printed all ready to start boarding, and we just kind of couldn't keep the things in the frame. So yeah, that was the kind of transition to a wider screen.
And going back to the year you spent prepping, I know you did some of it from, you know, from the land. Did you have a camera with you, like a proper film video camera, or
No.
did you have, because I was curious, just because I know there's so often like on tech scouts, right, where something magical happens and you're just like,
oh my God.
you know, and I can only imagine with the weather being what it is, unpredictable, like there were probably skies that rolled in and you're just like, how could I not be shooting this? Is that, am I right with that?
Yeah, I'm feeling it's so ironic how often on a tech scout or like a location survey, the light is just like kind of devastatingly beautiful when you come back with these incredible photos on your 5D. But I actually did that, like I kind of, after the year, I had obviously thousands and thousands of photos, and we had some of them went into the, we knew scenes were going to be set there, and then there was kind of some orphan shots that were still incredibly beautiful, that we knew we really wanted to get into the film. So I kind of made a big document with, I don't know, maybe 20 or so vistas that hadn't made it to be backgrounds, or were just like not practical places to take an entire crew to, with kind of GPS coordinates and lenses and notes. And whenever we were there for about 6 weeks or so in the valley where we shot the exteriors. So whenever there was a chance, I'd send Grant Adams, our Steadicam camera operator, off to, when we knew the light conditions were kind of going to be incredible, we could be pretty nimble to say, take this lens and go up to that hilltop. Or so a lot of those kind of ended up in the, there's some time lapses and some kind of landscape shots that I'm really glad made it in, because so many orphan shots.
Well, and you could tell you spent time with it. Like, you know, I've driven through Montana and North Dakota, and it's like you do get these moments where the clouds move so fast but it's like you couldn't predict that, right? So it's like you do have to have a camera and a person who can run off and get it just at that moment. And like I could see that clearly. And I guess to that, and I'm curious, like, how much did you use two cameras to shoot the action versus one camera for the action and one camera like B-roll, macro shots, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it really depended the day. Some scenes kind of led themselves to two cameras, and like I said, Jane's kind of TV experience, I think, really made her fall in love with what two cameras can do. So that was, I guess I hadn't actually ever worked with a director who was so like into shooting two camera wherever we could. That said, also kind of being precise with them. We would never put a, you know, sometimes you can have two cameras rolling and one feels like the A camera shot and then the other one always feels like the kind of B camera shot. If it ever felt like there was a kind of B camera shot, so to speak, we would probably decide not to roll it or to do them separately so we could do some better lighting, or kind of we also used it just a lot to kind of leapfrog and like go ahead, especially in those big kind of you know, locations. Some of the locations are, you know, even if they're on the same property, they're like 15 minutes drive, so send B camera kind of ahead and then we could catch up and kind of just every day was a bit of a jigsaw of how to get it done. And, you know, you've got that kind of end of the day, couple of hours probably where everything looks insanely beautiful. And then you've got the middle of the day, which also has its beauty, but it's just incredibly brutal and intense sun. So yeah, we shot big camera wherever we could and was practical, but we didn't ever kind of compromise the shots. And Jane's super smart like that as well. She's so kind of tuned in to aesthetics, and when something doesn't feel kind of right. But yeah, especially, I mean, with all the animals and that as well, we were always running 2 cameras because that's it's just a whole world of logistics.
Oh, of course. Yeah. You reminded me of something with the bright exteriors, but I don't know if you had the same methodology. Like for me on Mudbound, like my almost worst nightmare was that we had these, you know, dark interiors, dark wood. In my case, they were practical locations. We couldn't fly ceilings out. We didn't have windows, but trying to compete with the outside was like, you have to light the interior up in a way that, you know, I think we come from the indie world. We like, you know, natural light where we can. I tend to only light from outside spaces. I hate bringing lights into it, you know, an interior, but it was out of necessity. And yet at the end of it, everyone's like, oh, the natural light was amazing. You're like, wait a second. Like, you know, I pulled every light off the truck just to get it to look like it was natural light. Was that the case for you too? Or was the house, you know, on stage and the outdoor was the outdoor? Like, I wasn't entirely sure what the methodology was.
Yeah, I'm glad it didn't stand out as studio, because we had to, it just wasn't practical for us to have a crew kind of living down or staying down in this fairly remote location doing interiors, and being at the mercy of the elements as well. So we did all the interiors, interiors of the house, at least back in Auckland. So after we'd done the interiors, we went back to Auckland to where they'd built the interior set. And then the only bit we had was the kind of what we called the Cowboys dining room, where the Cowboys kind of eat in the morning. And there's a couple of shots that you can, one main shot where Rose runs outside before she gets the gloves, where we really wanted at least something where you could see, I guess, sell the interior exterior location. I don't know what you call it, stitch blend. So we had one kind of crossover room, which existed in both places. And then, yeah, in terms of doing the backdrops, we printed backdrops instead of doing green screen, blue screen. But I was always trying to, I guess, in many ways emulate that brightness and have them feel hot, you know, visually hot, like exposure wise, to not, even though you could balance it perfectly to still in many ways make it kind of feel like you're competing with it to sell the naturalism. And because we had already shot the exteriors, it's just such a good reference to kind of feel that intensity of the sun. Yeah, that was a real pleasure shooting in studio. I didn't anticipate how much I'd enjoy it. Just the control and and just I guess you can play a lot more in a way as well when, say, you know, as you know, you very rarely would be doing a night for night on location. If you're doing interiors, you'd be kind of blacking out the windows and tenting and stuff. And it does, as much as you can get kind of tricky with it and be really fun and creative in many ways, you just can't have the distance kind of that you would love to do, you know, a great moonlight effect or something that really requires, just sheer distance from the subject, which that's one thing I hadn't, I guess, anticipated so much, enjoying just the being able to light interiors with lights far away, especially night interiors. Yeah, no, that's great. That last shot, by the way, is just absolutely stunning. The sort of, you know, tells the whole story in one shot. Is really, really beautiful. Do you have a favorite shot or scene from the film? I have a few, actually. I mean, there's some that are kind of unexpected. Like there's one that it's kind of a really wide shot of the house on a super long lens that comes towards the end. Like dusky one, is it? Yeah, it's just after the funeral, and Peter's character's by himself at at the ranch, and it was kind of an opportunistic shot that I did whilst we were setting up a night exterior that just kind of presented itself. And yeah, just I love what happens when you can be really far from shooting a wide shot on a super long lens is so satisfying. And I guess in a place like that, you really can just go back and back and back. So that was kind of a gift, that one. And it didn't, when I shot it, it didn't have a place in the film. It didn't, wasn't for anything specific, but it really kind of worked where it ended up. It just feels like a kind of, I don't know, fresh kind of exhale, sort of new, I don't know, something's like changed or something. And then that whole sequence after that with the Peter is like playing with the dog and then standing by the fountain and then reading a book inside. I really love that sequence as well. And it's so funny when you think back to when you're shooting something, like shooting those kind of things at dusk, it's such a hustle. You know, but it's so peaceful, it's such a peaceful feeling to kind of, and that's also, you know, testament to Cody and Jane to kind of have everyone rushing about and then be able to kind of just ground and make it feel like no one's there. And
I think it's also a testament to, like, you know, that's where the year of prep work pays off, right? Where you know the story so well that you see something, you know, that was never part of the script, and you know what it could add to the film, and you know, you jostle the director and then they see it too. Like, you don't even have to have a conversation about it. You just, and everybody grabs the camera and runs for the hills or the, you know, cabin or whatever. But it's I think that's where, you know, you really at some point hopefully get to a place where you're just thinking with the same mind or feeling with the same heart, and it's such a great shorthand to have.
Yeah, totally. And also I guess knowing what doesn't work, you know, like when you can, you know, there's opportunistic things can sometimes do present themselves, but it's kind of like, I would have to be on such a wide lens to shoot that, and from where we are, let's wait till another day to get it properly, or, you know, that's not how we kind of, it doesn't fit in the in the world that we're trying to do.
What was in terms of like the visual language that you came up with together, such as shooting wide shots on long lenses? Like, what was the, you know, what was the reason behind that, and what were some of the other sort of rules you gave yourself?
But Jane really loves long lenses, and I guess not just for the kind of you know, soft backgrounds, but I guess what you can do in storytelling when you kind of stack things up together to have someone in foreground, a midground, and then background, and then the landscape. And I really got into that, kind of like almost like what you can do when we work with blocking and staging and kind of getting everything in alignment. Like a shot on a long lens with drama can kind of hold for such a long time because there's so much going on in each layer, and also on such a long lens, kind of every element is a similar size. Like two people can be standing really far apart, but they're not kind of, it's not like you're seeing a fuzzy shoulder and then someone kind of medium size and then someone tiny in the background, that they're really kind of similar sizes with the long lens. So that was one thing we tried to do as much as possible, and super fun being in this huge landscape where it's so flat and there's nothing blocking your line of sight in any direction. So you can really kind of stack things up or put things as far away as you can be bothered walking, really. And then I guess it's such a like information rich kind of script, but not wanting to be too blatant about, I guess it's kind of clues throughout that hopefully some of them is important to pick up on, some of them you don't, kind of deliberately don't want people to take too much notice of, but then also not get to the end and totally have missed it. So it's kind of a balance of, I guess, like the information in the frame, how to, and it's such a gut feeling of spending that time with the script and knowing how clear or not to be with things. We also kind of planned most shots we kind of were designed to hold for as long as possible, or they all alternatively, they had kind of a known duration. So we're usually doing shots that were, the shot that we knew was only going to hold quickly. You kind of compose the information in a very different way than if you know this shot's going to hold for 30 seconds in terms of how quickly you need to make a point or how quickly someone can absorb the information that shot's kind of designed to tell, versus a shot that's holds for a long time and your eye can really wander around and see different things. And then one of the words we kind of used was like non-judgmental kind of photography. I guess it's a hard thing to actually define what that is, but I guess it's, for Jane, it was like not having the camera make too much of a point, not pointing like too clearly at how you should feel. It's hard to like verbalize what that actually means. It's more of a gut feeling when you see a shot. Like, is it too kind of manipulative, or is it too, I don't know, biased, or kind of telling you what the film thinks about something that the film itself is somehow quite neutral in its opinion on what it's seeing, I guess, like what everyone's doing. And that's very much
it just occurred to me that it's like, more than most films, it's a fairly evenly weighted ensemble. Like it's I'm sure there are times where it's, if you're trying to ground yourself in whose subjective experience it is, and you have, 3 or 4 characters that all have equal weight, like that must have been tricky at times, because it's like, in a lot of films, it's one character story and everything kind of is from their perspective, but you have this interweaving of equally weighted characters.
Totally. Or some scenes had the same characters, but the point of view was from somewhere different. Like Rose playing the piano and Phil playing the banjo upstairs, very much kind of a scene it's not literally in her point of view, but it is kind of emotionally the scene. You're kind of aligned to her, and even the shots of Phil, they're not direct POVs. They're kind of almost like what's in her mind, this kind of monster, these macro shots. So I guess it was kind of just knowing, like, for each scene kind of whose perspective you were in, or it kind of shifts. And the book does that really beautifully as well. Kind of, Jane always described as like a figure of 8, or kind of like a bit like the rope. The book does such a beautiful job of handing off from one character to another, and you don't even realize you're suddenly kind of following someone else's story, and it'll find a way to kind of hand off and meander between characters without it feeling like, meanwhile, over here, this is happening.
Right.
The flow of the kind of figure of 8 just keeps going. And it is quite a gut feeling thing. There's not a formula to it all. And also Jane is so great in that she kind of, it's not that she doesn't love, anytime we have a rule, there's always kind of like an exception as well. So with the color palette, which is quite restrictive, or like not restrictive, sorry, but restricted, in these kind of earthy browns and golds and silver, and then always like an exception to kind of balance it out, like Rose's outfits, or the place where Phil goes to swim, and having kind of quite a camera that doesn't move much, and frames that are kind of I don't know, confident and heavy in many ways, and then a kind of handheld as well, which kind of gives some like levity and just freedom, and kind of not so pre-planned.
I meant to ask that, you definitely move between, a sort of studio, methodical, kind of very weighted, composed, and then these static moments and these handheld moments. And there, you worked a few drones in there. And I was just curious, like, how you guys, when you were, first of all, how much was from the pre-production phase where you're like, this scene feels like it's this? I mean, there were even scenes, I think, where you were studio on one side and handheld on the other.
Yeah, for sure.
I was just curious about sort of the language behind that, or the thought process behind it.
Yeah, I guess it started out, it actually morphed throughout the film a bit when we started. It was actually when we shut down for about 3 months during COVID, when it first started, back in the day when we thought it was over in 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that should be, I guess we're done.
Yeah.
So yeah, we initially in pre-production, we'd planned to only use handheld for Phil in the swimming kind of area when he's by himself, just to feel some kind of like release from the rigidity of the ranch and a kind of exhale of, yeah, I guess like kind of freedom, and just for it to feel completely free. And also because Jane really wanted actual freedom for herself and me and Benedict in that space to really not define in any way what might happen, or it was kind of very like free form, kind of little chunks of a couple of days being there, and even to shot list it too, kind of rigidly would start to define what was going to happen in those frames. So that was really free form, kind of very documentary almost experience with almost no crew and just Jane and I and Benedict, and kind of focus puller hiding and boom guy hiding. And then when we watched those cuts back of those sequences up during the lockdown, I think we all just realized how powerful they were, like what it was to have the camera be handheld and really close to this kind of character who is, quite a macho bully kind of person, doesn't let people close to him, but what it feels like when the camera does get close to him somehow, unlocked something for the viewer, very vulnerable. So we started experimenting with other scenes where we got to see Phil mainly by himself, and that it just felt right and kind of added a lot, whether it's when he's like kind of upset or he's kind of like unguarded Phil by himself. That became the logic, but again, like we didn't necessarily go back and go through all our notes and say this should be handheld, this should be handheld. It was more like we kept kind of with the shot list that we had, but then Jane or I would say, I think it should be do you think it should be handheld? And then either say like yes or no. But it was super fun in a way to kind of do that in the midst of this otherwise really intensely kind of planned shots. And I think Jane and Benedict really enjoyed that as well, kind of doing the interiors with a bit of freedom and just, I don't know, there's something that happens as well when you keep rolling and do that rolling resets, and it's a very digital way of working, but it can slow the momentum sometimes in scenes where a director and an actor are trying to get somewhere to kind of stop and have checks again, and everyone inevitably comes in and talks about what you want to change and are all doing their jobs and being very helpful, but there is sometimes a momentum that's lost, even if it's a few minutes between takes. Yeah, I think being handheld, we were able to kind of do a lot more rolling resets and have me reposition rather than having to get grips to come in and move the camera or change lens, just go in closer. Or I think that really gave something to Jane and Benedict for those handheld scenes as well.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly feel like it's nice when you can let your instinct, I mean, you're the person who spent a year prepping the thing. So it's like you can intuit whether to step forward or step back, or, give the actor space, or all of that, as opposed to, I mean, there are amazing dolly grips in the world, and I'm sure your dolly grip was incredible, but some of them haven't even read the script. I mean, hopefully they have, but it's just it becomes a game of telephone when it's like too many people are the ones making the call about where the camera should be. Is my experience.
Yeah, and then sometimes you think you want something, and then when you see it, didn't work. So when you're just stepping forward and stepping back, you can step forward and be like, I think if I step forward, it would be good. And then you get there and you're like, oh, actually, it wasn't as good as I thought.
Right.
To the left. Oh, that's better.
Or yeah, or you realize, if you short side something in the moment, like what it adds to the experience, or a flare like just starts to creep in, and you instinctively adjust for it.
Yeah, it's funny when I watch back the film, I can still, the voice in my head that's still there that's saying like, oh, tilt down a bit, and then the camera will tilt down. It's still like somehow the same. I'm still like wired into it. To my instincts are still the same, actually, to be like, oh, it'd be nice to tilt down right now. It's kind of exactly what what I did. Or yeah, just a great, I don't know, great like director, actor, DP collaboration that also kind of had an organic origin and really built to be, I think, really special. And just having, not even in the interiors, just being able to have less people in the room, I think, no matter how great and wonderful the crew is. And I love everyone that I work with and so grateful for all their help, but just, it is a different energy when there's 10 people in the room or 4 people in the room or 15 people in the room or 3 people in the room.
COVID has kind of helped with that a little bit.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
well, beautiful, beautiful work. I'm like, it really was such a, I mean, there's so much scope, and there are just those moments that feel like photographs, and it was, such a delight to behold. So congratulations. And
thank you. It means so much to hear you say that. Obviously, a big fan of your work as well. So
thank you.
yeah, it's always super meaningful when, I think DPs can see in each other's work, not just the whole effect, but then like all of the work that it takes to create a beautiful frame. It's like sometimes literally months of really boring emails and meetings and phone calls to create something so beautiful. But then you kind of finally get to be the first one to see it. It's such a kind of pleasure. But yeah, I know when I'm watching other DPs work, I'm always sometimes so in awe of like, oh, how did you do that? It's like a lot of planning, or like what a miracle to get that kind of all those elements come together in the exact
Yeah.
and then
I feel like that's the thing that we really understand amongst one another. It's like, it is a miracle to get a movie made, period, but then to have it all come together and and work as a story, the cinematography, when all of the parts, I guess the simplest way of saying it is when the sum of the whole is actually greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah,
it's like it is absolute validation, and it's so rare. So again, congratulations.
thank you so much.